In today's episode, I'll be giving my picks and predictions for UFC 309 with a betting analysis in mind. So let's jump right into UFC 309. Do something, man. People are questioning you. Shut up. Shut up. Okay, yep, do that. Sure, guys. Stupid and dumb. Just an idiot. Get your shit together, son. Fuck it. I loved it. Welcome to the DubCast. Before we start UFC 309, we need to address how I did at UFC 308. So on my official picks, I went 0-4, bringing my record since UFC 301 to a whopping 13-19 overall. And no, this is not good at all. So what happened? Oralby went to absolute war, loses a close decision to lose that first parlay I gave out. RDA dies within 1 minute to lose the distance parlay. That was pretty, no one remembers that happened, but what the fuck was that? Whitaker and Holloway, I thought one of them would win, but no. This event broke my heart, man. This just felt like the favorites are going to win every time, and it was tough to really put my heart into this card. Luckily, the next card we're talking about, we'll get into it. But Whitaker got submitted easily. He had a weak jaw that no one knew about. It got dislocated. That would have been nice to know before the fight. Maybe disclose that to the bettors of America, but that's neither here nor there. Max was at least even with Ilya, one round. I thought he was looking pretty good, but Ilya is just fucking absurd. I know that for sure now. Ilya's top 4 at least fighter in the world right now, probably higher. He's insane. Not familiar with his game. I bet against him with Volk. I bet against him with Holloway. I've learned my lesson. That will not happen again. Other main note events. I was busy this day, so I didn't watch most of these fights, only the Holloway fight, but Ankalaev wins. He's next in line for Pereira. That should be an interesting fight. Leroy Murphy wins decision as expected against Ige. And Shara with a sick spinning back fist to knock out his opponent. So really, decent card, good fights. I was watching the prelims in a car ride up to a trip. So pretty good card from UFC 308. No complaints. Obviously, I wish one of my bets hit, but that's neither here nor there. I did wake up to a nice rigged win by whatever that guy's name is against Leal. Don't know how to pronounce it. So gotta love Abu Dhabi, man. So enough about UFC 308. Let's dive into UFC 309. So UFC 309 is in MSG in New York City, a well-renowned fight arena for important fights, I guess. I'm not really, just having really started focusing on the UFC, I'm not really familiar with the aura of Madison Square Garden. Apparently it's some crazy place to fight. We'll see how this card plays out. If I'm being honest, I don't think this card is great at all. There's decently lopsided odds in at least 4 or 5 fights, meaning, it's kind of just a layup, sleepwalk through that. And it's lacking at the top of the card, in my opinion. I think main cards have had more intrigue, more draws to them. I think, the co-main event's pretty good. But on that main card, we have Bo Nickal fighting Paul Craig is the third best thing you can come up with for MSG. I mean, Trump's going to show up and everyone's going to be hyped, but what are we? I think that I hope, and UFC 310 fell apart, so now we're waiting on a sub for that. The UFC, man, it's slowly degrading in the event quality. I think they need to quit some of the fight nights and, maybe skip a weekend every month, and then you can create more intrigue on your cards and better fights, more time off, etc. But it's a business. They probably figured out how to make the most money. So with that being said, let's jump right into the fights. Our first fight of the night is a women's flyweight bout between Veronica Hardy, who's minus 140 on the money line. She faces off against Eduardo Mora, who is plus 120 on the money line. So before I go into this fight, new little update to the channel. I will be keeping it shorter for fighters I have already covered in previous videos. So I started with UFC 301. I kind of like to give these little rundowns of how fighters win, how they lose, how they've done in the UFC so far. And for your guys' sake, you can go back and watch the old ones. I know it might be old and repetitive and just bloat some of these videos. So that doesn't apply to this fight, but there will be fights where I've already covered somebody, and I will refer you back to that video if you want to watch the full my kind of full career breakdown on them to this point. I'm going to try and keep that more brief so we can get through the fights faster. So starting off with Veronica Hardy, she's the favorite in this fight. So she's been in the UFC since 2016. She's not really fought any notable opponents. Granted, it's women's MMA, so who are the notable opponents? But it is what it is. She is on a 3-fight win streak. 6 of her 9 wins have come via decision. She has 1 knockout and 2 submissions to her name. She lost 2 decisions. All 4 of her last 4 fights have gone to decision. She has been knocked out and submitted once in her career. Her opponent, Eduardo Mora, she is 2-1 in UFC-related promotions. She has a split decision loss to Denise Gomes, who I believe is a name in women's MMA. I'm not familiar with her game, but I feel like I've heard that name float around a little bit. 4 of her 10 wins have come via knockout, 5 submissions, and 1 decision win. She only has 1 loss, or her only loss is the split decision in June of 2024. So that loss to Gomez was in 2024 of June, so 5 months ago at this point. Before that, she was on a 9-fight win streak. So the picks here, usually don't like to bet the first fight of the night, as you guys know, but I do think there's merit to Mora as an underdog here. This is kind of leaning a little bit towards even to me. So I like Mora at plus 120. As for distance, they both have been able to prove that they're not just distance girls. A lot of these girls' fights just go the distance, but both of these women have knockouts and submissions in their arsenal, so I can't predict the distance, and I'm not confident in taking anything with that. So we are going to maybe consider Eduardo Mora to bet on at plus 120. Moving on to our next fight, we have a welterweight bout between Basil Hafez. He is plus 240 on the money line, and he faces off against Oban Elliott, who is minus 300 on the money line. So starting off with Basil Hafez, the underdog in this fight, we covered him originally in the UFC302 video. He claimed a decision win over Mickey Gall, who was actually fighting on this card as well. So during this fight, he was almost wobbled by Mickey Gall. Granted, he won a unanimous decision. Looked like a little, I don't want to say the word lazy, that feels like an over-exaggeration, but not like locked in fully. So that was something I noticed watching the highlights back of that Hafez and Gall fight. So what we know about Hafez, he's kind of a submission guy. A little under half of his wins have come via sub, and all of his losses when he does lose have come via decision. So his opponent, Oban Elliott, we covered him in the UFC 304 video. He claimed a unanimous decision win over Preston Parsons. I believe he may have been an underdog in that fight, but don't count me on that. I remember watching that fight, pretty good fight. So Elliott himself is on a 7-fight win streak, 3 of those wins being in the UFC. All of his losses have come via knockout. His 3 wins in the UFC have all come via decision. So the picks here, I solidly like Oban Elliott to get this one done. He ballooned up from minus 200 to minus 300, so that's something to note. I think the sharps like Elliott as well. Hafez is just a little bit too inconsistent for me, and Elliott has been strong in the UFC in his career this far. I think he's building towards something here. Hafez, we don't really know what we're going to get from him. Seems like a spot for Elliott to improve and move up the ladder a bit as well in the welterweight division. I think this fight definitely goes the distance, as that's how Hafez loses his fight. So by picking Elliott, I'm also picking the distance because that's, you got to envision the narratives in your head and what's going to play out. So 2 solid bets from this one. I like Elliott at minus 300 and the fight to go the distance. Moving ahead, we have another welterweight battle with the aforementioned Mickey Gall. He is a minus 140 favorite in this fight. He faces off against Ramiz Brahimaj, who is plus 120 on the money line. So a little bit about Mickey Gall. We did cover him in UFC 302 as well, obviously preparing for that fight versus Hafez. He took the unanimous decision loss to Hafez. He looked good in spots, but he couldn't capitalize. Obviously, losing a unanimous decision. I believe he only had 1 round from 1 judge. Not great. He's on a 3-fight loss streak. 6 of his 7 wins have come via submission. He was knocked out 2 times, and he has 4 decision losses. So we know Mickey Gall, 7-6 record, not the greatest fighter. His opponent, Ramiz Brahimaj, he's been in the UFC since 2020. He's lost to Court McGee, Max Griffin. He's 2-3 in his time in the UFC. All 10 of Ramiz's wins have come via submission. He has been knocked out once and lost 4 decisions, and 2 of his 3 UFC losses have been via decision. So the picks here, I think this is a weird one. I think I want to stay away from this. Mickey Gall, I understand why he is the favorite in this fight, but it's Mickey Gall. With his record, I just really can't pull the trigger on betting on him. As for the distance, I'm not sure if I could take this fight to somehow end via submission by either fighter. I think that's a bet you can do. I don't know who's going to pull off the submission, but I think this fight ends in submission. I think that would be a nice little side bet to make some money there, but not sure if that isn't a thing. Don't quote me on it. Also, it could be shit odds because they both kind of are submission artists, but that'd be the only bet I'd be considering for this fight. So moving forward and up the card, we have a heavyweight bout between Marcin Tybura. He is minus 150 on the money line. He faces off against Jonata Deniz, who is plus 125 in the money line. So about Marcin Tybura, he is 39 years old. He's been in the UFC since 2016. He's beat Spivak, Rothwell, Greg Hardy, Romanov, and Tuivasa. He's lost to Werdum, Lewis, Sakai, Volkov, Aspinall, and Spivak. So he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He was submitted by Spivak in August of 2024, so a mere 3 months ago. I think that's always something to keep an eye on. Of Tybura's 25 wins, 9 have ended via knockout, 7 submissions, and 9 decision wins. So a mix of everything there, really. Of his 9 losses, 5 have been via knockout, 1 via submission, and 3 via decision. So his opponent, the slight underdog here, Jonata Deniz, he's been in the UFC since 2023. In that time, he's 3-0. He's never lost in his career. Overall, has an 8-0 record. 7 of his 8 wins have come via knockout. He's been slowly fighting more and more relevant fighters, I think. So this will be a good test for him against Tybura, who's kind of on his way out, in my opinion. 39 years old, not really a hot take, but something you got to factor in here. So the picks here, I really like Deniz as an underdog. I think he's my favorite underdog on this card. Yes, he does not have the resume that Tybura has, but nearing the end of his career, Tybura is, and Deniz is really just starting the prime of his career. So I like Deniz. I like him also to win by knockout, as that has been his method of choice in all but one of his fights. Obviously, he's not choosing it, but he's able to put people out. He's got that knockout power. Heavyweight, that's just a knockout division. Tybura has also been submitted 3 months ago, as I mentioned before. I think that's, he might be a little bit weaker coming into this fight. Feels a bit early for him to come back, so I like Deniz to win this fight, and I like him also by knockout. Moving up the card, we have a featherweight bout between David Onama, who is minus 1,500 on the money line. He faces off against Roberto Romero, who is plus 750 on the money line. So David Onama, he's been in the UFC since 2021. In that time, he is 4-2. He beat Garrett Armfield, lost to Nate Landwehr, which I don't know if Nate Landwehr is good. I always thought he wasn't good, but I guess he might be good and good enough, solid, because of the fights I've been seeing in these videos. Anyways, he's on a 2-fight win streak. Onama is coming into this fight. Of his 12 wins, 7 have come via knockout, 4 submission wins, and only 1 decision win. Both losses have been by decision, and both losses were in the UFC decision losses. So his opponent, Roberto Romero, first UFC fight, he has an 8-3-1 record in previous promotions. 3 of his 8 wins have come via knockout, 2 via submission, so 3 via decision as well. He was knocked out once in his loss, and the other 2 losses he has on his record are decision losses. So the picks here, as I usually do with these minus 1,500 fights, I'm staying away. I hate betting on the UFC first-time fighters, in this case being Romero, especially not well-known ones like, Kaya Sakura or somebody like that fighting in the UFC for the first time, Michael Chandler, Michael Page, someone like that. Who the fuck is Roberto Romero? I know I'm a casual. Not to mention the odds for this fight are just completely dog shit, so there's really nothing of value here. This is a setup for Onama to get a nice win. I think early knockout. Most likely the odds in that are pretty horrible, so staying away from this one entirely. Next up, we have a lightweight bout between Jim Miller. He is plus 150 on the money line. He faces off against Damon Jackson, who is minus 180 on the money line. So Jim Miller, he's been in this game for a long-ass time. He might be the longest tenured UFC fighter. He's been in the UFC since 2008. He's beat Charles Oliveira. He's lost to Frankie Edgar, Nate Diaz, Cowboy Cerrone, Benil Dariush, Michael Chiesa, Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis, Dan Hooker, Oliveira, Selecki, and Alexander Hernandez, and King Green at UFC 300. He's 41 years old, and he's 3-2 in his last 5 UFC fights. Obviously, coming off that kind of war against Bobby Green in UFC 300, that was kind of, he's hung in there for a while. Obviously, King Green won that fight pretty easily, but Got to give credit for Miller for standing in there. So Miller, 20 of his 37 wins have come via submission, 7 via knockout, 10 via decision. He's been submitted 3 times, knocked out only 2 times, and lost 13 decisions, not 30. So yeah, Miller has a crazy record. I think he has at least 50, 60 fights. He's a legitimate fighter. I got to give him that. So his opponent, Damon Jackson, he's been in the UFC since 2020. He's beat Pat Sabatini, Alexander Hernandez, common opponent who Miller lost to. He's lost to Ilya and Dan Ige. He lost the decision in August of this year, so 3 months coming back from a decision, not as bad as coming back from a submission or a knockout. He's 36 years old, a little bit younger than Jim Miller, which is crazy to say. Well, not crazy to say, it's just 5-year difference, and he's 36. Jim Miller's just that old. So 15 of Damon's 23 wins have come via submission. He's got 4 knockouts, 4 decision wins, and his last 3 fights all ended in a decision. He's been knocked out 4 times, submitted once, and has lost 2 decisions. So my picks here, I think this is a decent one for Damon Jackson. I just can't trust a 41-year-old Jim Miller, although he has been decent recently. He's been kind of picking his spots, but he's too old at this point. I think the years are going by. Damon Jackson, fresh in the UFC, I would think he's got a little bit of time left. So both of these fighters are submission artists and also have lost via submissions as well. So both are susceptible to it and both can pull it off excellently. So I'm considering that same bet that I mentioned earlier on either or this fight just to end via submission. I don't know if I hope this is the thing because I'm saying it over and over again, but I like that. I also like Damon Jackson money line. Yeah, I don't think Jim Miller is winning this fight. I could be totally wrong, and this is like the Aldo versus Martinez fight where I'm like just counting out a veteran, but I just really like Jackson's resume better. Miller is kind of a fraud. Like, who has he really beat? He beat Oliveira a while ago. That doesn't really count. So I like Damon Jackson to win this one. Moving ahead, we have a middleweight bout between Chris Weidman. He's plus 100 on the money line. He faces off against Eric Anders, minus 120 on the money line. So Chris Weidman, another UFC vet. He's been around since 2011. He's beat Uriah Hall, Anderson Silva 2 times, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, Kelvin Gastelum, Bruno Silva. He's lost to Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, Jacare Souza, Dominic Reyes, Uriah Hall, Brad Tavares. He's 40 years old. He's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. So of his 16 wins, 6 have come via knockout, 6 via decision, and 4 via submission. 3 of his last 4 fights have ended in decision. 6 of his 7 losses have been by knockout. He has 1 decision loss, and he's never been submitted in his career. So his opponent, Eric Anders, he's been in the UFC since 2017. He's beat Gerald Meerschaert, Chris Doskis. He's lost to Lyoto Machida, a common opponent there. Thiago Santos, Khalil Roundtree, and Barry Alt, who I believe we covered in a previous video. Eric Anders is 37 years old. Like, what's up with all these fucking old-ass guys? Well, they're not really that old. They're only a couple years older than me at this point, but UFC prime's like 33, and then once you start getting past that, we're way out of our prime, and we're talking 4 years here for this fighter, Eric Anders, and Chris Weidman's 40. Like, why do we have at least 3 fighters that are 40 years old in this card? Anyways, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Don't know if I mentioned that. If I did, whatever. 9 of Anders' 16 wins have come via knockout, 6 decision wins, and 1 submission win. He has 1 loss via knockout, 1 loss via submission, 6 losses via decision. So the picks here, this fight to me is pretty perplexing. Nothing is really sticking out. Both these fighters are fighting up there in age. I just think Weidman has had an interesting career after being a crazy champion. Like, I didn't know he went on that run, to be honest. I am a casual. I'm slowly getting more and more into this, so excuse me for that. But he's kind of fighting the gatekeepers of divisions now, low-ranked guys. I'm not sure what we can expect from either of these fighters, especially Weidman post-leg injury. We've seen him a couple times, but we don't really know what he is. I just don't trust anything about Anders either. So distance-wise, it seems like this could also end early, could also go the distance easily, so I'm just not touching anything in this fight. Just a weird one to me, so don't really have any leans in that one. We move up the card to the last fight in the prelims, a bantamweight fight between Jonathan Martinez. He's plus 125 on the money line. He faces off against Marcus McGee, minus 150 on the money line. So a little bit about Jonathan Martinez. We covered him in the UFC301 video. I took him to beat Jose Aldo. Clearly a huge mistake. He lost in May there at UFC301. He just looked like he wasn't even he didn't even belong in the same octagon as Aldo. He loses in a unanimous decision, just gets completely outclassed. So Martinez, before that Aldo fight, he did have a 6-fight win streak. He can mix in knockouts and also some submissions. Only knocked out once. He does have 2 leg knockouts. I saw it today on Dana White's page, so that's something there. So Marcus McGee, he's been in the UFC since 2023, 3-0 in that time, 9-1 overall in his career. 8 of his 9 wins will come via knockout. The other win being a submission. His only loss has come via submission. This is his first fight in the rankings. Obviously, Martinez got moved down a shit ton, I think. Maybe not a shit ton, but he's down to like 13. McGee, I haven't heard of any of the UFC guys he's fought up until this point. So the picks here, I think Vegas is sleeping on Martinez a little bit in this one, to be honest. He's done the work to get up in the rankings, and he was ranked pretty high before the loss to Aldo. He's had 6 months since Maya in UFC 301, which, wow, that's crazy. UFC 301 was the first one we covered. We're 6 months later. Here we are at the UFC 309, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, he's able to recover, learn, and prepare for this fight. If there is a get-back spot in fighting betting, I'm not sure if there is one, but if there is, right here is a great one for Martinez to take this. McGee is very dangerous. I'll give people that, but I'm just not impressed at all by McGee's resume, and this is a test for him. Sometimes people have to fail tests. You can't win all the tests. So Martinez has only been knocked out once. McGee's got that knockout power. This will be an interesting battle. I like the over rounds here also. If it's like 1.5, I like the over there. 2.5 probably not, but Martinez, I like him at his money line plus 125. He was plus 110 earlier in the week, so I'm going to let this one marinate a little bit. Maybe people will keep sleeping on him, and if he gets losing this one, he'll join the ban list probably because he's selling false dreams, but I do think he can pull this off against Marcus McGee. I also like that over 1.5 rounds for this fight. So we've arrived at the main card. Our first fight of the night is Our first fight of the main card is a lightweight bout between Marcio Ruffy. He is minus 950 on the money line. He faces off against James Lontop, who is plus 550 on the money line. So Marcio Ruffy, we covered him in the UFC 301 video. He knocked out Jamie Mullarkey there. Just smoked Jamie Mullarkey consistently. Mullarkey stayed in like too long. Even the fight could have been ended earlier. Good win for him. So Ruffy, he's got 11 fights, 10 knockouts, only 1 loss, and it was via knockout. So this one's ending early. He's on a 5-fight win streak right now, 2-0 in the UFC. His opponent, James Lontop, he's been in the UFC since September of 2023. In that time, he's 1-2. He, of his 14 wins, half have come via knockout, 1 submission, and 6 decision wins to add on to that as well. When Lontop has lost, he's been submitted twice, never been knocked out, so I thought that was pretty interesting, and only 2 decision losses. So the picks here, you can probably predict what I'm about to say, but stepping stone for Ruffy to maul this guy and get more hype around Marcio Ruffy. No KO losses for Lontop is a bit suspect, but maybe Ruffy is the first one to chin him. Like, that seems like something that could easily happen. We saw that Prates versus Li Jinglang, I believe. Maybe not, but whoever Prates fought 2 fights ago. I think it won't matter as much as Ruffy has been a beast throughout his career and has never had a fight go the distance. I think this fight will end early, probably for Ruffy, like 90% for Ruffy. I don't know. I just don't see the vision for James Lontop to win this one. I feel like this feels like a start the main card, Ruffy knockout, woo, like, they like to do that stuff. So feels like a stepping stone for Ruffy to climb, but the odds are too crazy for me to take anything in this one. Next fight, we have a women's flyweight bout between Viviane Araujo. She's plus 240 on the money line. She faces off against Karine Silva, who is minus 300 on the money line. So a little bit about Viviane Araujo. She is 37. She's been in the UFC since 2019, beating Jennifer Maia. She's lost to Jessica Ai, Alexa Grasso, and Amanda Ribas. Of her 12 wins, 3 have been via knockout and 4 via submission. She has been knocked out once, never submitted in her career. Her last 10 fights in the UFC have all gone the distance. One of those crazy woman fighters who just always goes the distance. It's so crazy. Her opponent, Karine Silva, she's been in the UFC since 2021. She's 5-0 in that time with a win over Ketlan Souza, who I believe we covered in one of the past videos. That just rang a bell. So of Karine's wins, 8 have been via knockout and 9 have been via submission. She does have 1 decision win, her most recent UFC fight. Her losses are split. 2 submission losses, 1 knockout loss, 1 decision loss. So the picks here, I'm picking Karine Silva pretty easily. The question is, how does she get it done? She has some tricks up her sleeve, but I just may take this one to go the distance. Decision win. Her most recent fight was a decision win. My theory is, the more you get into the UFC, the more you're fighting, the more you're fighting real opponents, it's gonna draw out longer. You're not just gonna get knockouts, especially in something like women's flyweight. So we'll take that to go the distance, most likely, depending on the odds. Araujo is just too old to make this one close. I think she has kind of had a pretty fraudulent resume up until this point. So granted, Silva's resume is not that great either. She has yet to lose in the UFC, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So in this one, we'll take Silva money line and fight to go the distance. We'll see what we end up actually taking for the official card and all that. So the third to last fight on the night is a middleweight bout between Bo Nickal, who is minus 1,500 on the money line. He faces off against Paul Craig, who is plus 750. So a little bit about Bo Nickal. He joined the UFC in 2022. Since joining, being 1-0, he's 5-0 in the UFC in that time. He beat Cody Brundage, who I think is like half a name, but that fight was, I don't know. 2 of his 6 wins have come via knockout. Submissions make up the other 4 wins. He's only had 1 fight even start round 2. He's obviously a well-renowned wrestler from Penn State in college. His opponent, Paul Craig, we covered him in the UFC301 video. He got knocked out by Kyle Baralho, who's a dog. Paul Craig is 1-4 in his last 5 fights, easily chinned. He's a submission artist, but he could be submitted, though, as well. So the picks here, once again, not touching this shit at all. Obviously, this is a quote-unquote test for Bo Nickal. He's fighting somebody who people could actually maybe type in a UFC like roster namer if you had to name like 200 names. I think Nickal is easily going to smoke this 36-year-old fading Paul Craig. The only question is, does he knock him out or does he submit him? Either way, Vegas is probably on that shit, so I'm staying away from this one. Just no good odds here. As soon as I see a minus 1,500, I'm not touching that shit with a 10-foot bowl. Co-main event of the evening. This is what I'm actually looking forward to, and this isn't even going to be that good of a fight probably, but we have a lightweight bout between Charles Oliveira. He's minus 265 on the money line. He faces off against Michael Chandler, who is plus 215 on the money line. This will be a 5-round fight, 5-round co-main events. Always down for that. So a little bit about Charles Oliveira. He's been in the UFC since 2010. He's beat Jeremy Stevens, Jim Miller, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, who he's fighting again, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Beneil Dariush. He's lost to Jim Miller, Cowboy Cerrone, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, Paul Felder, Islam Makhachev, and most recently Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. So before fighting Islam and I forget who else he's fought. I think he's had 2 other fights since then, but he was on an 11-fight win streak, went on a crazy title run. Hate to say it, but as a creator of this channel, I have to keep honest. I love Charles Oliveira. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, so I will be openly rooting for him in this fight. 21 of Charles's 34 wins have come via submission, 10 wins via knockout. He only has 3 decision wins to his name. And when it comes to losing, he has been knocked out and submitted 4 times each. I believe he only has 1 decision loss, but that could be wrong. We'll see about that. So his opponent, Michael Chandler, he joined the UFC in 2021. In his 5 fights, he is 2-3 in that time. Kind of sold the bag. A lot of people were hyped for Michael Chandler, but we'll have to see what happens in this fight. He's beat Dan Hooker. He's beat Tony Ferguson. He's lost to Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, and Dustin Poirier, both of those last 2 who Oliveira has beaten. And Michael Chandler obviously has not fought since November of 2022, waiting for that fight with McGregor that never ended up materializing. Was he training? Has he been ready? What has he been doing? What has he been up to? Is he mentally ready for this? We'll find out. It will be almost a 2-year, or it is going to be a 2-year layoff at this point. So Chandler's career, 11 of his 23 wins have come via knockout, 7 wins via submission, 5 decision wins. He's only gone to a decision once in the UFC. His losses have been 4 knockouts, 1 submission, and 3 decision losses, including other promotions. Bellator was his other promotion that brought him into the UFC, being famous from Bellator. So the picks here, as a Charles fan, I love Charles here. Chandler's just been pretty underwhelming in the UFC, I believe, up until this point. He fought Dan Hooker before Dan Hooker. We saw Dan Hooker at UFC 5 was crazy. This was a long time ago when he couldn't even see his kids. So I don't know how much I put into that fight. Besides that, you have Tony Ferguson, who's lost 8 fights in a row. I don't think Chandler's resume is really that good. So we'll see. Maybe he can fraud check himself and win this fight, but I just don't see it. I like Charles Oliveira in this one. Rematch here where Chandler was knocked out in the first one. Doesn't do much, especially for me off the 2-year layoff for Chandler. I'm pretty biased here, I mentioned before, but I do love Charles in this fight. I do think he can submit Chandler pretty early in this fight as well, maybe a round 2, round 1 submission. So the picks here, I'm taking Oliveira by submission and Oliveira money line. Finally, we make it to the main event of the evening, a heavyweight bout between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. Wow, it's finally happening, guys. The fight we've all been waiting for years and years and years and years. Because who is Tom Aspinall, right? God. Well, it'll finally be over after this. Either Stipe will be champion and he'll fight Tom Aspinall, or Jon Jones will win this fight and retire. To be seen on Saturday. So having not covered either of these guys yet on the channel, let's dive into their resumes. Jon Jones, 37 years old. He's been in the UFC since 2009. He's beat Stephen Bonner, Marcio Rua, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Alexander Gustafsson twice, Glover Teixeira, Daniel Cormier twice, Ovin St. Preux, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes, and most recently Cyril Gane. He's undefeated in his career at 27-0. He has one DQ loss to Matt Hamill, throwing a 12-6 elbow, but the UFC just forgets to admit that, so I'm keeping that off the record as well. So I'm in the good graces of the UFC. 10 of Jon Bones Jones' 27 wins have come via knockout. He has 7 submission wins, 10 decision wins. So pretty split evenly between all 3 ways to win. 3 of his last 4 fights have gone to decision. He's coming off that injury, and he has not fought since March of 2023, so almost an 18th-month layoff for Jon Bones Jones, the quote-unquote GOAT of the sport. His opponent is Stipe Miocic. He's been in the UFC since 2011. He's beaten Arlovsky, Werdum, Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou, Daniel Cormier twice as well. He's lost to Junior Dos Santos, lost to Cormier though, and also lost to Francis Ngannou. He has not fought since March of 2021. So in the co-main event, we have someone who hasn't fought since November of 2022. And in the main event, we have someone who hasn't fought since March of 2021 and March of 2023. Make it make sense, right? But Stipe Miocic, of his 20 wins, 14 have come via knockout, 1 via submission. He has 5 decision wins. Of his 4 losses, 3 have been via knockout, only 1 decision loss. Obviously, at heavyweight, things are a lot more, I don't want to say extreme, but like you're either knocking people out or you're getting knocked out. Stipe did a lot of the knocking out. So the picks here, at this point, the main card is so shit, and I'll probably have lost a lot of money for my bets, as I usually have been on the recent UFC cards. So I'm going to do it. I'll take Stipe. Fuck it. Let's go, Stipe. Dude ran this division. He's been too busy fighting fires, being a working man, not bullshitting about fighting Tom Aspinall. He's ready to do whatever. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Stipe Miocic wins this fight and pisses off Dana? Imagine Dana's press conference if Stipe Miocic wins this fight. I'll be going nuts. I don't even hate Jon Jones, really. It's just like the lead up to this fight was so stupid, and them having Aspinall fighting in interim title fights. What are we doing? Like, I get it, you promised Stipe something. The man hasn't fought in 3.5 years. Stipe is also 42, so this isn't the greatest bet in the world, but I feel like the odds are just borderline disrespectful. Stipe ran this division. Jones is only in his second fight moving up to heavyweight. I'm not even saying this is likely to happen, but Stipe at plus 450, it's worth it for the memes if it does happen. We all know some of Jones's wins are pretty fraudulent. Alexander Gustafsson 1 sticks out. I've not watched the Reyes fight, but I heard that one's not really great. The Thiago Santos, I believe some people think he lost that as well. So coming off an injury too, I don't know. I'm putting my money in Stipe. It may just be pissing down the drain, but I want to have some fun with my bets. I'm not betting on fucking Jon Jones at minus 725. I also like the over here. I think if it's set at like 1.5 or even half round, Fuck it, we'll take that. Like Stipe can survive. He's 42. He's an old man. He can stand in there. So the picks here: Stipe money line and the over on rounds. So that's the card. Now let's get into my bets and my main four picks of the evening. So starting with the things I'll be betting on, but I'm not confident enough to sell to you guys as not sell, tell you guys to take as an actual bet. These are things that I want you to consider, think about. Maybe ride with me if you're feeling it. You got that extra cash to spend. Starting it off, Gal and Brahimaj to end via submission via either fighter. If it's either fighter, then I take that. If it's like separately, you have to each take them both and just forget that one, and also forget that for Miller and Jackson because I have the same pick for that one. Deniz via knockout, I think is a little juicy if you like Deniz against Tybura. Martinez and McGee over 1.5 rounds. I think that one starts slow. It's gonna be a boxing match, so it's gonna there might be do one of those things where they dance around for 4 minutes, don't really hit each other. We'll see. Oliveira by submission. That one's a little juicy. I don't know if he's gonna knock him out again. I like the submission. I think Chandler could get submitted pretty easily. So that's it for all the bets. I will say this one was a bit short just because some of these fights were just ridiculous odds and stupid. So now time for the official DubCast card. Let's cook. I got 3 parlays in a round robin. So starting it off, I will clarify this round robin will only count as a win if I make money. If I lose money on the round robin, then it's a loss. So we have 4 picks for the round robin by twos, underdog parlays here, underdog round robin. We're taking the first fight of the night, Mora moneyline. I think she has a decent shot at winning. Deniz, I like a lot. Martinez, I like decently. And Stipe is like, fuck it. So if even 2 of those connect, you probably win money on it. It's the UFC, though, and 90% of favorites win every time. So this could be a fucked bet, but I've been fucking shitting the bed lately. So let's throw something at a wall and see if it sticks, eh? So prelim parlay. Oban Elliott and Damon Jackson both to win. That should probably bring you down to maybe plus money, maybe around even. Elliott's odds unfortunately ballooned a shit ton when I was doing the research for this. So at minus 300 now, maybe it's not worth it, but we'll see. Main card parlay. Silva to win and Oliveira to win. I know Oliveira's I believe they're both in like the 260s range, so that could probably give you maybe like plus 110, something like that, around even money as well. So 2 solid parlays there. Last, always got to end it out with a little distance parlay. We'll take Elliott and Hafez to go the distance and Silva and Araujo to go the distance. Hopefully Vegas doesn't realize that Araujo and Silva is a women's fight because they do have some other stuff mixed in there. But that'll wrap it up. So what do you guys think of my picks for UFC 309? Not going to lie, this isn't the most I've ever been looking forward to UFC card, but I probably will still end up watching it. And man, if if John Jones loses to Stipe Miocic, I won't be sad. I'll tell you that much. Tom Aspinall, if whatever. I there's enough channels out there where you can go get your bait videos. I'm not gonna go into this. That'll do it. UFC 309 in the books. Do you guys agree with my picks, or are you taking everything? It could be a good idea to fade me. I've been losing recently, but that means I'm due theory. So that'll wrap up UFC 309 coverage. We just did a stream, NFL Week 10 recap, Week 11 predictions on Wednesday night. Survivor came out late last night. Episode 9 reaction to everything that happened in that. A crazy good episode. Besides that, expect more movie reviews. We'll be back for UFC 310 and NFL Weekly. TV shows will mix in here and there. So as always, be easy and go, Stipe, go.